Thank you. Yes, Sustainable Surf, if you're not familiar with this, we're a nonprofit. We're based in California, and I'm in Manhattan Beach. My partner, Michael Stewart, who's the co-founder, is in San Francisco. And we started Sustainable Surf as a way to really help the surf community engage much quicker and deeply in solving these major issues. And climate change, for me, is the biggest issue. This is about how we change the narrative and how we talk about this issue. So to me, it's about understanding tipping points. If you don't understand tipping points that are everywhere in nature, then we can't really solve this problem. And there's a lot of tipping points inherent in climate change. So this is a picture of me in Antarctica in 1996. When I was doing my research, I still had hair. Wish I had that back. And that's the dry valleys in McMurdo. It's the driest place on Earth. And that is the Meserve Glacier that we actually dug a tunnel underneath that glacier. Right, whoops, where's that? There's a laser pointer, there we go. Right there. So I dug a tunnel underneath the glacier as part of my research. So if you're not familiar with tipping points, they're literally everywhere if you just know how to see them. And I say see because this is my favorite fossil. This is a trilobite. These were around 400 million years ago. And the reason I think they're cool is because those eyes right there are made from stone. So their eyes were made from stone, calcite to be exact. And they fossilize because most eyes, eyeballs, and critters are soft tissue and they don't fossilize. But in trilobites they do, and they're amazing. And the reason that's a tipping point is this, is that during evolution, being able to see your food meant that you could get more food. So as a result, eyeballs have evolved 45 times independently throughout the biology of the Earth. That's a pretty major tipping point, but do I need that? Okay. All right, so we got the mic. So that's a big tipping point. That's not even close to the next one, which is right here. So the oxygen that we're breathing right now, the Earth didn't form with oxygen in the atmosphere. And that was actually created by the first organisms on Earth, the first bacteria that photosynthesized, the archaean form of life. And they produce oxygen as their toxic byproduct. I say toxic because they were the first critters to figure out how to kill themselves off in their own waste. That was 2 billion years ago, okay? When I heard that in my undergraduate geochemistry class, I was like, wow, now I want to work on climate change. Like I understood the relationship between what we're doing now with emitting CO2 at such an amazing rate geologically, and what that meant for big picture changes on how the Earth's fundamental chemistry works. I was also really interested in how systems change. I studied physics as well, so we'll get into that in a minute here. Okay, so when I talked about recognizing tipping points everywhere, you guys have all seen the Al Gore movie, right? So I don't have to explain this curve to you. Just in case, this is the ice core records from Antarctica, and it shows 4 ice ages. So here's our warm period now. This is 100,000 years of cold. A brief warm period, another ice age, 90,000 years, 10,000 years of warm, and so on. And because CO2 tracks this exactly, that's the proof that CO2 is what drives global temperature. Okay, so where are the tipping points in this curve? I don't understand, people don't understand this more. I mean, maybe I need to talk more, but the tipping points are here. The Earth tends to go from cold to warm extremely fast. It takes a long time to cool down, but when it warms up, it goes fast, and that's because there's all these feedbacks in the Earth's climate system that amplify a warming signal. Okay, so what will 400 ppm do? Okay, so here's a key point. During this 400,000 years, CO2 never went above 280 ppm. Went from 200 to about 280. And this is the equivalent of a mile-thick layer of ice over Seattle and New York. And this is where we're at right now, okay? So it's a pretty big change. And now, this is where CO2 is today. It's way above that. So what is that signal going to do to the feedback mechanism? So here's one good example, fire and feedback. This is what happened in Ventura and Santa Barbara this winter, right? And so as the forest fires burn, they emit CO2, and also diminishes the ability for plants to take out CO2. So it creates more warming, which causes more fires, and so on, right? That's one feedback. This is actually a much bigger one. This is the permafrost, and I'm a permafrost geologist, so I love this topic. And this is about methane blowing out of the permafrost in Siberia. That's a crater caused by a methane explosion. And methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas. And there's so much methane in the permafrost that's being released as the Arctic melts that it will pretty much overwhelm the human emissions quite rapidly. If we don't slow that down, then we're heading for runaway feedback on climate change. But this is the really big one. This is the biggest feedback mechanism of all. It's disrupting ocean circulation. That's what happens when the Earth warms. The ocean conveyor belt, which you see up there, goes around the entire oceans, stops. and it breaks right in Greenland. That's right up at the X there. So there's a pointer's dead. And it stops circulation, which means no oxygen gets to the deep ocean. It means that nutrients don't come up to plankton, which then can't photosynthesize. And we're already seeing, you can already measure this disruption happening. And if we don't stop this, then that basically makes everything else in the ocean irrelevant. This is what causes mass extinctions. All right? And this is the story, right? Climate is an angry beast, and we're poking it with sharp sticks. This is Wally Broker. He's one of the most famous oceanographers who's really brought up these issues. So how do we tame that angry beast, right? I'm an optimist. I'm not a pessimist. It's easy to look at this and say, oh my God, what are we going to do? Like, there's nothing we can do. Actually, we can solve this problem pretty easily if we have the right approach. And again, that comes down to understanding tipping points, how to recognize them in every situation that we're working on, and how to create leverage, no matter how small or ineffective you think you are, actually you have more power than you might think. So what is the theory of change? Okay, here's the 100th monkey. The 100th monkey idea is that in Japan, the macaque monkeys learned how to wash sweet potatoes, and it made it a little bit easier to eat. And then before long, every monkey was doing it. And the idea is once the 100th monkey figured it out, then every monkey would figure it out, okay? So I call that systems change, and there's many different names for systems change. I'm going to talk specifically about market transformation because I think that if we're going to make progress on these issues, we have got to get our businesses really engaged, right? So market transformation is the term I'll use for the next two examples of how we can all start to get more engaged in solving this. Okay, so the key elements here is that you need a new vision of the future. What is the vision that's better, more sustainable, better for the ocean and the planet, that also is better for business and better for people? If you can articulate that, that's the starting point. Everybody has to benefit. And you have to figure out what each stakeholder is, not just one or two, but everyone, every business, every person, government, media, academia, NGOs, whatever you can think of. They all have a role to play at different stages of the transformation. And then this is actually the thing I think that gets left out the most, is that people tend to want to generalize, well, we have to get everybody. If we just educated everybody, then they'd all do better. Really, what you want to focus on are the individuals right now who are most ready for change. Get them moving, and then tell their story really well. And that way, everybody else can see the new vision. They can say, instead of just having to think about the vision, they can see somebody else doing that vision and say, oh, I can do that too. All right? Okay, so I promise you there's a reason why there's washing machines in this photo, right? So I used to work at the place called the Energy Trust of Oregon up in Portland, and they had this amazing program on transforming washing machines and other appliances, the markets, to be dramatically more sustainable. And I learned a lot of the techniques that we use in sustainable surf now to transform surfboards as well. So these are my two examples. Okay. So this is the theory of market transformation. You've got these different stages. If you start on the left, you've got the inventors. They can be just crazy geniuses. They can be incentivized by some kind of prize, like the X Prize, or it can be a government grant, or it can be scientists. Whoever invents the idea, then you have the early adopters who start to build it and use it. Then as that idea becomes more proven, the market realizes it's a growth area, and every market wants a growth area, so it starts to grow. And at some point, more and more people are doing it, and eventually it becomes dominant. Okay, so the tipping point is, how do we make this happen much faster? So this is an example with the washing machines where this tipping point happens suddenly. So to give you the big picture here, so these energy-efficient washing machines, they use 40% less water and 80% less energy. They save a ton of money. They have less wear and tear on your clothes. It makes a lot of sense, but nobody in the US was buying them. It was a 2% market share back in 1999, right before this program started. And they started the program in 99. In 2 years, they went from a 2% market share to 20%. And then year two, it was 25% of the market in these test regions running this market transformation program. Year three, the laws changed to make every single washing machine in the US 30% more energy efficient. So it was sudden transformation. And the politics have been trying to make that happen for 20 years, and the washing machine and the retail lobbyists stopped them. They fought them. But suddenly they saw, oh, wait a minute, now we're making more money on a machine that costs twice as much. They're like, oh, we want that. We want that market. And it made money for the consumers who were buying it. They were saving money on energy. And suddenly the law got changed. 3 years later, the law got changed again, another 30% rise. And 4 years after that, yet again, another 30%. Over that time, it saved 25 million tons of CO2 just from energy-efficient washing machines, and there's now 36% of the US has those. And the manufacturers realized they could make a machine that was a candy apple red automotive paint to even charge more money for it. So that basically caused that phenomenon, okay? And this is how they did it. They put a $100 rebate on the machines, and they trained the retailers. They said, okay, guys, we're going to teach you how to sell these washing machines with the rebate, which completely changes dynamics of how a consumer looks at something that costs more money, right? And they also had cool marketing with like the grimiest soccer team contest. This is in the Northwest where soccer is a huge thing, and there's a lot of mud because it rains all the time. Okay, so now let's talk about surfing, because that's what we're here about. We're about oceans, and we're sustainable surf. We're not washing machines. So what is the power of surfing? Surfing is the sport that has a way to tell a story that gets everybody interested, whether they surf or not. It's the #1 sport that kids want to learn in the US more than any other sport, and it is a lifestyle phenomenon that's used to sell every product you can imagine. You just watch TV. You'll see ads for cars, computers, beer, whatever. Surfing is always there. So when we started Sustainable Surf, we wanted to transform key areas of surfing that were problems, and the surfboard was a big one, right? So with the surfboard, we said, what if every surfboard could be made sustainable? We started the EcoBoard project, which was a certification campaign to transform the market of surfboards. Now we started it in 2012, and back then, there were 500 boards that were using, maybe made globally, that were using things like recycled styrofoam from packaging, or plant-based bioresins. And they definitely worked, but nobody was buying them. And so we said, okay, we're a nonprofit, we're independent, we can work with every company, we're gonna come in and transform this market. And so what happened was we started working with the market leaders, a few of the big shapers like Lost and Channel Islands, if you guys are surfers. Timmy Patterson was the first big name shaper that we got to try these materials. And then they started to see sales growing. And then we started working with some of the pro surfers that we knew, like Alex Gray and Greg Long and Rob Machado, to start trying these things and compete on them, and they actually worked pretty good. They're like, this is amazing. Like, why wouldn't I want a surfboard that performs great and is also better for the environment? And to basically make a long story short, this is the impact. In 2017, there were 60,000 EcoBoards made globally, going from basically 500 in 2012. And that number is going to get even bigger this year because now we got John riding algae foam at the Bells contest right now. If anybody's watching it, let me know when his heat's on. This is a major transformation. Now what's happened is a surfer who is an environmentalist pretty much knew their surfboard they were using was the least environmentally friendly product they could imagine. Because they'd been to a surfboard factory, they smelled the smell, and they knew it was bad. Later on tonight, we're going to have Ryan Harris from Earth Technologies glassing an EcoBoard right here in the middle of our party with the plant-based resin, the recycled foam. And then we even have Eddy, who's joining me up here shortly, showing how to recycle the waste foam with worms, right? So suddenly the surfboard is the best example of a sustainable product. That's the power of the story. And we did it, I'll skip this slide, but just to let you know what transformation is, it's about knowing who all the stakeholders are and talking to them all the time and identifying the key ones that are the most ready for change now and spending your effort on getting them going and connecting the dots. So we're talking to the shapers, we're telling media, hey, check out this story's cool. We're getting pro surfers to try them and ride them, getting their feedback, giving feedback to the manufacturers of the boards to tell them how to make boards better. We're talking to academia, doing research. We did a life cycle analysis 2 years ago, and so on and so on, right? Okay, so now let's talk about how we use these principles to solve climate change. So we've got barriers to solving climate change. There's few positive stories and role models. Most of the stories are super negative, right? We got a lack of individual engagement, where I would say the biggest problem is that the people who care the most about it don't do their carbon footprint, they don't know what their impact is, and they don't really engage personally on how to reduce their footprint. How can we get politicians to lead if we're not already doing it, right? And the negative stories create a lot of problems. To me, that's the best way to create disengagement. This is obviously a polar bear who's starving because they can't get to the pack ice because of melting Arctic, okay? We want to focus on the positive solutions that really engage people on immediate benefits. It's not about, I'm doing this to save climate change. No, I'm doing this to save money, which also reduces my carbon footprint, or improve my life. That's the message that needs to happen. It's about creating the positive, immediate benefits that, oh yeah, I have this great byproduct that, of course, why wouldn't I want that too? And we need to focus on the communities that are ready for change right now. I've said that before, but really that's the people in this room, right? People in this room, and I would say also the surfing community. We've got to regenerate the Earth's ecosystems. This is sort of the last step, and this is why I'm bringing Eddy in. Eddy is, when I met him about a year ago, I realized that he was a guy who really knew how to regenerate local ecosystems in a way that was so connected to nature that I had to know more. I actually brought him in. Actually, hang on a second. Let me just finish this part because I'm running out of time. So who are the first monkeys? We are in this room, right? So what we want to do is basically work with everyone here and our surfing community to get people to make the change happen in their own life. And we call this a deep blue life. Okay? Right. We've got more programs coming up, but I'm going to bring Eddy up. Come on up, Eddy. And I'm going to get Eddy's video going. Let's see. There we go. They can start it up.
Yeah, no. Have a seat. Hi, everybody.
Yep. So Eddy made a video that basically is the best introduction to what he does, and then after you play his video, I'm going to ask him a few questions and give you the benefit of his wisdom, how we can be more regenerative and actually solve these massive problems coming up at us.
When you're surfing, you don't really think about it. It's like a moving meditation. It becomes an extension of yourself. What I do in the soil and how I treat Mother Nature is also an extension of myself. A relationship to nature can be growing food, or it can be pulling into the barrel in beautiful waves, or just paddling out in the morning and looking at the reflection on the water. We're really lucky that we have the ocean and Mother Nature as a playground. That's our filtration. You'll notice these are all big breeders. You don't even see the babies. The babies, they're just spreading them out as they go. So that's frosting for your cake that you made for us. This is one of the most healthy migrating worms that there are. He'll move far. You can bait him with different bacteria. You can bait him with fish water, with nitrogen. And this way, this is their waste, and it's pure fertilizer. I was born off the coast of Florida, and I was, for the most part, raised in Hawaii. As early as I can remember, I've always been interested in things growing, in the beauty of our planet, in the perfection of nature. I wasn't very intrigued by the whole school system. The system is not necessarily set up to teach you about stewardship or how to take care of the land, or necessarily how to take care of oneself. Growing up in a natural environment where you can still drink the water from the stream, where you can hunt and fish, it's a perfect paradise. I decided to kind of let nature be my school. If I look at a leaf that's fallen from a tree down by the stream, the earthworms will chew that leaf into dirt. When I look at a whole pile of leaves that have fallen down to the stream, I look at a whole pile of dirt a month later. What we're doing now to build soil is a culmination of years and years of observing the perfection of nature. In coming to California, the environment is only slightly different from Hawaii. So a lot of the things that I use in Hawaii carry right on over into this environment. One day, I brought some mealworms home for my fish to eat. And I was thinking, oh, mealworms grow really easy. That's a culture where I could give my fish a protein source. I got them out of a pet shop, and they were in a styrofoam container. Well, I noticed the next day that they'd eaten some of the styrofoam. And then I started to wonder, well, wow, are they actually breaking this down into an organic material? After we were about a year into our experiments here in California, we found an article from Stanford University. Turns out that Stanford was doing a study on mealworms. They were able to determine that the mealworms did indeed turn the styrofoam back into completely organic, usable material through intestinal gut bacteria that they have. We've continued those experiments and tried to take it to another level, and we have plants growing in it. We found a worm here in California
that's very similar to the mealworm I was experimenting with in Hawaii, and it eats 10 times the amount of styrofoam. I think a great way to introduce it to people is through the surf industry. We're able to take the surfboard, chop it in half, the worms go inside of it, they're able to eat out the foam core. All we're left with is the fiberglass that was put around it. We're able to grind that up into a composite material to make new fins with. It becomes pretty evident by taking something that's supposed to stay on the planet forever and finding a way to break it down naturally and be able to reutilize it, that the solutions to our environmental crisis are already there. It's just for us to take our time and let it happen. Mother Nature's perfect. We're the only thing that's introduced that sets her off balance.
Yeah.
So, one way that we're using the technology that's available to us along with the bounty of what nature has to offer is aquaponics. Aquaponics is sort of modeled off of hydroponics, which is the ability to grow plants without soil in an inert medium using a chemical to fertilize them. So what we've done is we've created a living system that's very similar to that, but instead of it relying on chemicals to feed it, it relies on the creatures of nature and their symbiosis with each other to actually create nutrients. Many people have chlorinated pools. Chlorine is a chemical, and it's very detrimental to the soil and to the environment. So what we have going here is we have replaced the chlorinated pool water with fresh, clean water. We've added fish to it. You're feeding the fish some of the lettuce that you grow. They're pooping, and that poop is available nutrients for the plants to grow on. So the fish are providing nutrients for the plants, and the plants are providing filtration for the fish, just how Mother Nature set it up along a stream bed. Imagine jumping into a pool, and it's like jumping into a glass of spring water. It's clean, it's refreshing, it has no detrimental effects. We're able to grow fish in it, and we're able to grow plants to eat out of it. This pool has water that we can drink out of it. So if we got in a situation where there's no water, like there's lots in California here, our pool becomes a drinking source.
So my approach is to get as holistic as possible. To get the bugs out of the garden, we put lights on the pond. The bugs go to the pond, free calcium for the fish to eat, and they're naturally raised fish without any...
The best way we can inspire people is through positivity rather than assault. Trying to tell someone they're doing something wrong, it never feels good for anyone. Trying to show people the things you're doing right and the potential we have to do it right, that we exist in a time where we can do it right, I think that's really important. When you show people there's a different way, then they start to be able to see it as practical and that they can utilize that. In Hawaii, people are really proud of what they grow. There's a word in Hawaii, it's called the aina, which means the land. Malama ka'aina. Malama ka'aina means to take care of the land. Our planet takes care of us. We want to be able to take care of our planet. How do we do that for our great-grandchildren? I think to be a caretaker and to be a steward is something we want to do as children. How do we bring that into our adult lives? We live in a day and age now where we can incorporate technology and we can turn anywhere into a farm. It can be an old swimming pool, it can be an old warehouse, it can be a parking lot. It doesn't really matter. Because technology has gone so far, now I feel like it's time for us to walk back to nature with technology. And that makes us really powerful.
You guys inspired now? So let me connect the dots here. So my talk is about how urgently we need to regenerate the Earth's ecosystems through a blending of modern wisdom and science and our technology industry, blended with ancient wisdom, right? And Eddy, who grew up on Hawaii, to me, Hawaii is one of the best examples of a sustainable society, basically in human history. It had a very sustainable culture, which I'd love to tell you more about. But what I'd love to do here is, I think we can actually solve these big problems if we have the right regenerative mindset. Regeneration, that's what it is. Regenerate the Earth's ecosystems. So Eddy, why don't you tell us a bit about what regenerative means to you and how you came about those lessons growing up on Hawaii?
Okay, I would say you guys hear the term lately, regenerative agriculture, regenerative lifestyle. I think it's pretty simple to regenerate, to leave something better than when we started. We look in nature in a forest, and a forest doesn't need fertilizer. It doesn't need management. There's a perfect system set up for itself. We tend to interrupt that. So the idea of what regenerative to me means is to sort of plagiarize nature and to sort of mimic what's going on around us and try to create systems that regenerate themselves, that leave the land better than what you started, and that can cross over into business, into lifestyle, into many things. But the idea of regenerative is to leave it better than where you started, so that we're leaving some of this borrowed time on this planet for our great-grandchildren. So the idea of regenerative practices, I think that they can far exceed what we hear about organic practices. Organic practices are trying to get away from commercial fertilizer, from pesticides and chemicals and all sorts of other things. Regenerative sort of speaks a lot further than that to, we've kind of confused the land for money, and we've traded that ideal, that this wealth that comes out of the land and this relationship to nature is sort of traded for this monetary sort of equivalent. And regenerative ideas kind of bring you back down to where we're from, that we can do things the right way based on the natural systems that exist around us. So that, for me, is where regenerative, I think, in general, it's a broader term that, for me, mostly applies to agriculture with what I do, but I think that it is a much broader term, regenerative, into what we can do with our lives and our everyday practices.
That's right. I think it's actually much easier than we realize. I mean, I think for me, growing up, in California, going to many years of school and having a pretty wealthy lifestyle, for me, I wasn't that connected to nature. Like, I love being in nature. I didn't know my role in helping create nature. So I did a little project with Eddy at my house in Manhattan Beach, where I had a completely dead yard from a remodel. And Eddy came over, and we set up a regenerative project in my garden, which is currently fava beans 6 feet tall. 4 months ago, it was completely dead soil. And what we did is we took all the building blocks of the most healthy soil, the vision of the most healthy soil ecosystem you can imagine, and just put them in place and let nature do its thing. It would have taken years to get to where it's at in just a few months. And we can do that on a global scale, right? So Eddy, why don't we talk about how easy it is? Okay, one more thing. So again, I'm challenging everybody in this room to become a first monkey in being regenerative. What can you do in your life to be more regenerative in helping things grow and reducing your impact? And Eddy, how easy is it for anyone to, say, grow their own food, would you say?
I would say in this day and age, it's really easy for anybody to grow their own food. And there's like 3 requirements for that: observation, patience, and consistency. That's all it takes. Everyone tells me they got a black thumb. You have a green thumb. Oh, lucky you. It's really about paying attention to what's going on around you. If we can look to the natural systems as our mentors, and we are a natural system, we like to think of ourselves as a singular being, but we're made up of a gut biome that's millions of beings working together. We need to sort of figure out that same symbiosis around us with what we do. For instance, Kevin's yard was sand and decomposed granite. Everyone looks at what I do in Hawaii and they say, wow, you're in Hawaii, of course it's gonna be that nice. Our soil is actually not as rich as your decomposed granite has the potential to be over here. Literally just adding organic material into it and life that's able to process it builds this system. So the idea of coming into a place like Kevin's and saying, oh, okay, that's just a blank slate. Great, let's throw what we would find in nature in a forest there and help it rebuild itself. So he talks about fava beans. Fava beans are what we call a legume. They're a nitrogen-fixing plant. And what that means is that they're able to pull nitrogen out of the atmosphere. Nitrogen is all of the green growth in plants. Plants are grown by basically nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. Roots, stems, and fruit, and green growth. So that nitrogen-fixing plants, one of the most widely used nutrients in fertilization in the agricultural industry is ammonium nitrate. It's made from recycled bombs from World War I and World War II, for the most part. They claim that over 80% of all the food eaten on the planet in the last 80 years was grown from ammonium nitrate. Because in the early 1900s 1900s, Nobel realized that ammonium nitrate will mimic nitrogen in plants. So you can actually grow nutritious food with chemicals, but you cannot grow soil. And so what you're doing is you're creating a dead end. So what we need to realize, in order to grow food, we need to grow soil. And to grow soil, then everything is going to fall in place behind it. So we can look at that sort of in our lifestyles with people. We sort of need to regenerate soil in our lives. And some of this is just, sorry about my sidetrack on that. But it's that whole concept of we can treat our relationships and our time on this planet like we treat our garden. And a lot of you don't treat your garden yet because you probably don't have that connection. If I could bring any one thing to any of you out here, it would be your connection to nature. Because once you start to connect, you start to live it, you start to feel it, you start to become a part of it. Once you're a part of it, that's all the difference in the world. It's a gateway drug. You can't stop it. You realize that responsibility that comes with it, and you're part. And you won't throw your wrapper on the ground again. You'll think twice about what you buy, where you spend your dollar. So to me, this is a long-winded answer on that, but as general, we were talking about regenerative. So how can we incorporate regenerative, and how quick can we make the change? We know in nature it takes 1,000 years to build a forest. Leaves have to drop, everything has to go on. But in this day and age, with where technology is, I have this theory that we are now able to walk back to nature with technology in our hands. And I have this theory that back in the day, the farmer was uncool. He was wearing overalls, had a piece of straw in his mouth, where straws came from, by the way. And everyone wanted to be James Dean. They wanted to move to the city. They wanted a fancy car. The farmer was no longer glorious. So the chemical company said, hey, we got all this bomb material. Look, there's all this land. Let's us take over the farmer. So statistics. In the beginning of the 1900s, the amount of farmers that were farmers, family farms, were 90%. They all used organic fertilizer. That has changed now to the amount of farmers are 2%, and they're almost all chemical fertilizers. Sorry, I'm getting over my time limit here.
So that's cool. So Eddie and I, we both have organizations that will help you find your path. Deep Blue Life is our program. It's Sustainable Surf to help surfers find their lens, their way into, or on-ramps into reducing their footprint and being regenerative. And Eddie has Living Earth Systems, which is a consulting firm to basically help solve the problems. If you want to hire him to come make your yard or make your pool regenerative, you can do that. And you have a new nonprofit that you started. What's it called?
Yeah, so I also want to reiterate on Living Earth Systems.
Yeah, okay.
Living Earth Systems, we are a design firm. We design lots of different things, from major farms to minor farms to helping individuals. So I just want to point that out. You were an individual that we helped, and that's the start, the small person. The nonprofit that we've just recently started is called REC Centers, Regenerative Education Centers. So we are looking to have these centers serve their local communities, and the other half of our project is filmmaking, and that we can reach larger audiences through documenting what we're able to do and how we're about ready to bring these changes. And that is Regenerative Education Centers. That's our nonprofit.
Yep. So we're not quite done. We got 2 minutes left, and we got to talk about the worms.
Okay.
Okay, so Eddie and I have a table over there on the side. Eddie's got an aquarium full of styrofoam eating mealworms, which you got to check out. When I first heard about this, I hadn't met Eddie yet, but I heard about this, I was like, no, I can't work, right? Worms can't eat styrofoam. And I should know a lot about that stuff, right? Because I know mushrooms can eat petroleum and plastic, no problem. Turns out the worms have bacteria in their gut that digest the foam. To them, it's just food. So they don't care whether it's plastic or not. And what it did is it blew my mind, because I always thought once something was plastic, it was no longer part of nature. But technically, it's still organic chemistry, even though it's plastic. And there's no reason why nature can't deal with plastic if we just set it up in the right way. So you got to check out Eddie's aquarium over there, which has basically the stages of turning plastic into perfectly fine soil. We're not taking questions. We'll do it afterwards. But definitely come over and check out our table. And I guess I would say, Eddie, finish it. We got 1 minute.
I want to
tell us a bit more about how you came up with that worm idea and what it means to you.
Okay, so I think how I came up with the worm idea, that's kind of stated on there already. One thing I want to point out to everybody, because I have a lot of companies that are saying, hey, give it to us, we're going to start chewing surfboards down to it. They'll only make it into smaller pieces. They'll slightly mineralize it by themselves. But what this is a complex system of many creatures that work together. Fungi, bacteria, amphipods, millipedes, wood lice, which are roly-polies, all of them together have the ability to break this down after a screening system, a float system. It's a complex system that I've developed. So I just don't want people to let the enthusiasm get ahead of the facts and think, oh, I'm just going to go throw some styrofoam with some mealworms at home. It's really important that you realize it is a system, a complex system, that eventually brings it 100% full circle into organic material. We're not growing food with this right now. We're growing material to build new surfboards with it. So I ride a surfboard, I break it, I feed it to my worms, I grow flax material, they can glass my new board out of that. Rye Harris will be here later giving a demonstration of the glassing and some of the things that are going on with that. But it looks like our time's getting pretty low on there. But, okay.
Anyway, so thank you so much for listening. I mean, I think our point here is that we want to help you figure out your own tipping point, and whether it's in your business or your garden. We're here to help solve those problems. Yeah. Let's do it together, because we can definitely solve
Let's think of one other thing on there. We all hear about recycling. We all hear about a lot of these different things going on. Let's change the narrative. Let's start to think about bioremediation. Let's start to think full circle of something we pull out, putting it back where it came from. That's my thought on that. That's my narrative.